Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about overcoming Myside bias, enhancing fairness in decision making. Now, when I was preparing for the episode, it was my first time seeing the word Myside bias. So I'm very excited to talk to our guest today about this topic. And also, I'm a big fan of TED, and this is my first time talking to anyone from TED, so I'm pretty giddy with excitement. And so to introduce our guest today, we have Lisa Bu in our virtual studio. Lisa Bu is the first TED staffer ever to be invited to speak on the main stage at the TED conference. Born and raised in Hunan, China, Lisa has been with TED since 2011. Before that, she spent 7 years as a talk show producer and a digital media content director at Wisconsin Public Radio. She's also a computer programmer with a Ph.D. in journalism and an MBA in information systems from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as a BA in Chinese from Nanjing University in China. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, your background is very impressive. And, I have to ask, how did you get here? Because it's interesting. Computer programming, talk show producers, like very diverse. And I'm curious, how did you get here? Why did you choose to do the work that you're doing?
Well, so I grew up in China and I spent 3 years working after graduation from college in China, just trying to figure out what I want to do. And then I really love BBC. I've been listening to BBC to learn English, but then I found out BBC is also a great source of information, kind of opened a window to the world for me. So it's like, hey, I want to do a job in a public media like BBC, but first I have to get educated so I can break into that field. So I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison to get my journalism degree. But it's really hard to get a job after I got my degree. So at that time, 1997, 98, the Y2K scare, there are a lot of jobs opening for computer programmer. So I said, well, maybe I just have to take a detour. So I spent the next some years getting my degree in information system, get a job, and worked as a computer programmer for 6-7 years, got my green card, and then turned back to public media. That's where really my heart is. So that's why it sounds a lot. It's all because I want to survive and I want to find a job in media, just find all kinds of ways to do it. Yeah.
Wow, that is so interesting. So what it is that you're doing nowadays? What is interesting in the media world for you lately?
So right now, I've been working for TED for, 12 years. So I'm on the global business development team. So my job has several parts. One part is really operational, technical, preparing our files, our assets, we call it, for our partners around the world. The second part really is to trying to find revenue, find opportunities for business collaboration with all kinds of platforms. For example, I have partners in China, there are video platforms or English learning app. So doing business development, that's the second part. And the third part is really using my language skill. I produce and host the TED in Chinese podcast.
Oh, wow. That is super cool. Well, I mean, I gotta tell you, I told the audience at the beginning, I gotta tell you again, I'm a huge fan of TED. I have
Thank you.
been listening to TED Talks for as long as I can remember. And just, I feel like every time I feel down or I feel like I'm in doubt and I don't really know what I want to do, what I want to put on, I just throw on TED Talk. That's what I do. And when I used to live in a shared house, my housemates used to say, "You watch a lot of TED Talks." That was their comment about me. I was like, "Lu, you watch a lot of TED Talk." I was like, "Yeah, I do. I enjoy them. They're great." So yeah, I'm sure you probably will be able to share with us a lot of interesting insights, especially because TED Talks are such great sources of knowledge. And obviously today we're talking about that the knowledge side of thing when it comes to decision making, our point of view, and our point of view is probably influenced by multiple people's point of views, and even sources on the internet with the influence of media. So it'll be very interesting to learn more about this topic today. But before we get there, we have a section called Have You Met Lisa? So I'm going to get some recommendations from you in this part, and 5 very simple things. So first thing that comes into your mind, and I'll prompt you with some question. First of all, what is a book you would recommend?
My very changed my life is this book, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. Yeah.
Wow.
It's Joseph Campbell. Well, he already passed away. He's a world-renowned researcher on mythology, and he is also the mentor of George Lucas, who made Star Wars, inspired really by kind of the hero's journey, this archetype in Joseph Campbell's research. Yeah, definitely changed my life.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Okay, I'm already putting that onto my to-buy list, so thank you. It'll be right in my Amazon cart. Next one is about a movie. What is a movie you would recommend?
I always love Forrest Gump.
Yeah, what a great one. Such a classic. And you're a guest on our podcast today. What is a podcast you would recommend to our audience?
If it's English if you only understand English, I always love The Hidden Brain. Now you can tell like I love psychology. The Hidden Brain. And then if you also happen to understand Chinese, my go-to podcast is 不明白播客. It's produced by a great journalist from New York Times.
Wow, I love that. And the English podcast, the Hidden Brain podcast, I literally just watched his TED Talk the other day. So yeah, I just saw it the other day, and then you mentioned him today. I'm like, yes, I love that. I haven't listened to the podcast very often, but I really love the TED Talk. So yeah, now that you've shared your recommendation, I will definitely put that onto my to listen list. And next question is about your role model. Now, this could be a famous person, or if you don't have a famous role model, we would love to hear if you have a personal role model, or you can share both.
Okay, I'll share both. My first one actually will be a fictional character. So when I was growing up, Jane Eyre from that novel, Jane Eyre, she's kind of my role model, how to be strong, how to become independent. So that's her. And after I came to US, the first several years, Oprah really was my role model because she's in media, she's great, and she came from a humble background. So it's a very inspiring story. And nowadays, I really see my dear friend, my 94-year-old friend, Amy Gartsky in Madison, Wisconsin, my role model. She's my host mother when I came to US. She has this wonderful zest for life. And I love her approach to getting old and also how to overcome challenges in life.
Yeah, well, that's so sweet. And I love all of your role models. And I guess, we learn different things from different people, but we learn the most through people that we are close to and, people in our lives. So that's really wonderful to hear. Last question in this part. What is a course you've completed that left a really strong impact on you?
I really love the social psychology class I took in grad school. It's really the first time I have this comprehensive training of all the theories or methodology or conclusion in social psychology. It's just eye-opening. You really human beings are such a interesting, predictable sometimes, not predictable other times. It's a great kind of self-awareness or know everyone. It just made a big impact on me.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds very fascinating. And, it's like one class, but it left a really strong impact on you. So, and I think that's why you were saying earlier, you really like psychology. And I think it's kind of, interrelated. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So now let's talk about today's topic. Now that we've got to know you a bit better, we're going to talk about Myside bias. I'm very curious about this topic because as I said, when I was preparing for this recording, I was kind of looking at the word and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that's about, but it's also my first time seeing the word. So it's not that foreign of a concept. I'm pretty sure everyone can understand that vaguely, but we'll go into more details today. And it's in the context of well-being because our well-being is made up of so many different aspects, right? So this is one particular aspect, especially when it comes to decision-making. And having fairness in decision making can impact ourselves, impact others, and essentially our well-being. Now, before we start digging deep into that topic, we always talk to our guest about well-being because that's what the show is about. So, Lisa, what does well-being mean to you?
It has, most importantly, 3 dimensions for me. The first is a sense of control. It kind of, I'm going to be fine, or you, or the community will be going to be fine if something happens. So that's the first dimension. The second dimension is sense of purpose. You feel your life, your time, your effort they all serve a purpose. So you have something to look forward to. And the third dimension for me is a sense of belonging. So you belong to a tribe, belong to a group, a community. So you don't feel alone. You don't feel not supported. So for me, those 3 dimensions are the most important facets of well-being.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And in fact, the recording I just did earlier today was focusing a lot of the sense of control and, being able to make our own decision, having autonomy in our lives. And that is definitely one of the key aspects to it. But I think, when it comes to decision making, there's so much more to just, being able to make your own decision, right? It's also about, are you making the right decision, especially for your well-being? Is your decision being influenced in a good way or a bad way? Or, are you actually making this decision for your authentic self? Like those are the questions that, I guess we all ask ourselves because we make decisions on a daily basis, whether it be a really small thing or a really big thing. And that can impact our well-being directly. Like, it's simple as, okay, should I sit here and watch some TV or should I go for a walk? Like those things. I think little moments in life really add up and they're really important. So having that sense of control and making the right decision for yourself is so important. But those are just a few things when it comes to well-being. I'm sure you've probably encountered a lot of different aspects of well-being and, how people approach their well-being in your line of work. And especially since you're so interested in psychology, you'll see this quite often. So what are some of the things that you think people get wrong when it comes to well-being? Like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions out there in your opinion?
I will, two misperceptions stand out for me. The first is many people tend to think well-being is a very static state, but it's actually fluctuate. It means you feel great today. You may not feel great all the time. You may have ups and downs. It's all fine. It's a kind of, there's a range. As long as you stay in that range, you'll be fine. So you won't feel, today I feel kind of so down. There's something wrong with me. So it's going to be ups and downs within that range. So that's the first misperception. And the second misperception is some people may think there are some absolute criteria you have to hit to measure your well-being. Actually, I don't think there's any absolute like a measurement there. So if people can have this two misperceptions corrected, they may have an easy time on themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. Those are pretty apparent, but sometimes people just don't see it because, especially when it was the first one that you mentioned, right? The static state of well-being versus the fluctuating state of well-being. It's been mentioned quite a few times on this podcast, but I think it's still important to emphasize on the fact that if you're not feeling well today, it doesn't mean that you don't have a sense of well-being. It just means that maybe, your well-being needs a little bit of TLC today. You need to take extra care of yourself today, and maybe tomorrow you'll feel great again. And I think that is where a lot of people are kind of frustrated because maybe there are periods or prolonged periods of time where they don't feel great, they don't feel a sense of well-being, and in that sense they just kind of give up on taking care of themselves, or they feel frustrated and sometimes, and this has happened to me actually, feeling frustrated for feeling frustrated. Like I feel like, it's been not great for a long time. And so I feel not great for the fact that it's been not great for a long time. So it's kind of like I'm adding more stress on top of what is already not so great of a thing. And that just puts more pressure on it. And really it's okay. I think it's so hard to say this out loud, but it's okay to not be okay sometimes,
Yeah, indeed. I've seen this and I've experienced this myself, where you are doing a project or finishing a class or you are doing a job, and it's like, Jesus, this is really frustrating and I'm not making progress, or something goes wrong. And then you said, is this for me? Is this degree for me? Is this job for me? Is this a project for me? So you will have self-doubt.
Yeah.
But it may just for that a short period of time. And once you kind of pull back, have a longer time perspective to look at things, you will feel much, how do I say, it's like ups and downs are normal.
Yeah.
No matter how great a job it is, like I love my job at TED, but there's sometimes you do get frustrated. So like, oh my gosh, I really don't I don't know how to unstuck myself. But it's just that normal, just stay with it, just observe it, let it go, work a little bit. I love a thing I was told by my fellow graduate students at grad school. They say, one day at a time. You just need to do one day at a time. Don't think too far along, because it's going to be intimidating. When you look at the whole project, oh my gosh, how can I do that? Just take a next step, next day. Don't let this bigger goal intimidate you. And
yeah, totally. It's so true. I think it's interesting when you talk about project, because my background is in project management, and I see everything as a project, and sometimes to a fault, because I overwhelm myself with, for example, the life project. I'm like, oh, these are all the things that I want to achieve, and these are all the different steps that I want to get to. And I overwhelm myself by planning 10, 20 steps ahead when things don't normally go as you plan in life. Like projects at work, maybe, but not life. So, it's taken me so long to let go of that, like planning and control, and just making sure things are in my diary at a certain time, and having things go as planned or go as I want them to be. They just don't go that way, because life is unpredictable, and there's lots of different factors that would, impact where your life's going to go and how things are going to unfold. And so now I totally agree with you. I just embrace one day at a time. And, I remember one of the guests on the show even mentioned at one time, if it's too overwhelming, take one day at a time. Or maybe actually not one of the guests, but I saw this somewhere on the internet, actually, apologies. If it's still overwhelming, take it an hour at a time. If that is still overwhelming, take it a minute at a time.
Yeah.
And
great advice.
I think that helps immensely when it comes to dealing with anxiety, and because that's what a lot of people are going through nowadays, right? Like anxiety is a real thing, especially when life's unpredictable and you just want to have everything under control, but it doesn't always work that way. And
Yeah. And
I feel
oftentimes
like,
we have perfectionism working
yeah,
against us.
exactly. And we just want everything to go the way we want them to go. And we're just kind of like, oh, like it has to be this way, otherwise I won't do it. Well, not really. You're okay. Just go with the flow and things will be okay. And that's so hard to embrace. Sometimes it's really hard to embrace because you always want things to go a certain way. And speaking of which, today's topic is about the my side bias and the fairness in decision making. I mean, I know that it's a broader topic than just making decisions for ourselves, but I think when it comes to our lives, right, we are trying to make the best decisions at all times, given all the information that we know, so that our lives can go a certain way. But sometimes, even when we think that we've made the best decision, it doesn't go as well as we think. Or sometimes we think we made a bad decision and things go so well. Or sometimes we just make a decision based on the information that we have. And then we just kind of shooting into thin air. We kind of really don't know what's going to happen. And then it works out. So, I think that's the wonderful thing about life. You never know what's going to happen. And instead of trying to have everything under control, it's just good to, like you said, take it one day at a time. And I'm saying this out loud to remind myself, but first and foremost, I'm reminding myself of this every single day because every single day is a battle. So yeah, I think it's a really good point that you raised. So now that we've touched on that decision making a little bit, today's topic is about the my side bias, and this is probably the complete opposite, or maybe the other side of the coin when it comes to having open-mindedness. So we would love to ask you to help us define this so that our audience can start to think about these concepts. How would you define open-mindedness versus my side bias?
Okay, so I'm going to go my side bias first. Tell the truth, this is the first time I hear about this term when I get your agenda. But then once I look into it, it's actually a form of confirmation bias, which is a term have been used in psychology for a long time. So what it means is a tendency for people to seek out, to process, to memorize information that agree or confirm their existing beliefs, opinions, or attitude. Basically, you are have this tendency to over seek or use information that agree with you, and then you kind of dispute or ignore information that doesn't agree with your existing belief or opinion. So open-mindedness will be the opposite. Open-mind means you actively aware and actually take effort to seek out information that's different, even opposite to what you already know or believe or want to believe. So it's two different tendency in terms of information seeking and information processing. This is in very academic psychology.
Yeah. Definitely. I think it sounds a little technical, but in fact, we see this every day, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of examples.
Yeah.
I see myself still doing it. For example, what TV or what books or YouTube channel do you watch? Like, I can see myself. Usually, I subscribe to channels that kind of kind of agree with my opinion in political or cultural issues. I tend to discount or totally ignore some information source that don't agree with me. So I can see that happen to myself and to, oh my gosh, the next year going to be election year. You're going to see a lot of like a political party. You only get information from the liberal information sources or the conservative information sources. We see this all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a good point that you raised there, because when it comes to my side bias or confirmation bias, it's basically also influenced by what we consume daily and where we point our attention, right? Because it's up to the channels that we follow, the news platforms that we frequent, sometimes even the different magazines and online magazines that we visit the most, because people all have biases. So, if we follow a certain channel or a certain stream of information, that's what we're going to keep getting. The algorithm or whatever it is might not suggest new things or things that are different, but most of the time it's kind of like it's just gonna keep suggesting the same thing or similar things. So you're getting affirmed by what you want to believe in, basically.
Yeah. And then it's a wonderful feeling when you are validated.
Yeah.
Right? I think
So
human beings, it's primal. We want to be validated. We want to feel I'm right.
Yeah, so true. That's so true. Yeah, we want to be right at all times. I couldn't agree more. And that is why the my side bias that we've been talking about here, it influences our judgments without us realizing it sometimes, because we think that we're following the best source of information or the best way of thinking, only because that's what we think to be the good things, right? So it's affecting us every day without us realizing it. So, the my side bias here, as we mentioned earlier, it doesn't just influence the big decisions we make in life, but maybe even everyday, daily decisions and decisions that impact us in our well-being in real life. So, what would be that impact of letting our my side bias sort of take over sometimes and affect our decision-making ability? And especially when it comes to our well-being, this is important to know.
Yeah. So there are, for example, well-being. Oftentimes we get information from we call influencers. Mm-hmm. And where do you find influencers? Probably people you think, oh, this person shares with me, therefore I can have more trust, or this person therefore has more credibility. Oftentimes we either fool ourselves and I'm pretty kind of objective, but sometimes you just didn't realize you have that bias working in your head. So for the well-being, I think it's, how do I say this? I'm rambling now. I think it's very important to be aware. We are very easy to have this bias. Therefore, it's important to make extra effort to seek out people who are unlike us or from a different perspective. Yeah. So, for example, talking about sleep, there's so much, especially a few years ago, so much talking about, this entrepreneur or that great artist, like they don't sleep. It's like sleep only a few hours. They seem to be kind of a badge of honor. Yeah. But then if you kind of not careful, you I'm kind of agree because if you said, look how hard I'm working, I have hardly enough hours to sleep, therefore like I must be very good because I work so hard. And then you seek out more information to validate, to confirm this, versus if you go say, is that really good for me? Is it really good for my health, for my relationship? Then maybe seek out other information, either from doctors, from psychologists, from even anthropologists, believe it or not, who study sleeping. Then you realize it's actually not good for you because our brain needs sleep to flush the waste out of your brain, literally biology. Then you can have better, not only brain function, but emotional well-being, and then your overall health because you have less stress. So that's an example. Don't start your information seeking or information processing from a already preconceived opinion, but really kind of put away my badge of honor and just try to be like a scientist, seek out information from all kinds of sources.
Oh yeah, I really love that because in Adam Grant's book Think Again, that's exactly the concept, right? It's think like a scientist. And I think that's a new skills for a lot of people, because not everyone is a scientist, but in fact, it's a really good skill to harness. And speaking of sleep, that's hilarious you said that, because again, there was another TED Talk that I watched the other day. The TED Talk is called "Sleep is Your Superpower," and yeah, that's based on research. It's based on actual facts, and so I believe in that. And again, like this is where I seek information. Like I go to TED Talks because I know it's not based on sort of like random people just sharing their opinion, but also most of the time based on research, based on facts. Some other times based on actual experience that we can relate with. But and of course, one size does not fit all. So it means even when I really enjoy certain TED Talks, I'm not just following the TED Talks for the sake of it. And thinking like a scientist is kind of fun because you challenge everything that you think and all the information that you are absorbing. If someone is saying something, you just don't take it as at face value, basically. And sometimes it feels really amazing when someone validates you or reaffirm your belief, just like what you were saying earlier. But when that happens, it's also good to think of the other end of the spectrum. Okay, that's really good to hear that someone thinks the way that I think, but I wonder what other people, unlike me, would think. So then, it helps to kind of harness the best source of information. And, when we are making wise decisions for ourselves, obviously we're going to enhance our well-being. Like the sleep example you were saying, if I just follow that and say, oh yeah, like, if I don't sleep and I just keep working and, like going with the grind, I'll be great. Well, I might not be eventually. So yeah, that's kind of important for us to remember. So when we were talking about, that Myside bias earlier, we were also touching on fairness in decision making. Now, I'm sure we're covering fairness in all shapes and forms. Like, is it fair to us? Is it fair to others? Maybe in the organizational context, is it fair to our colleagues, our teams? But when we are talking about thinking like a scientist, a lot of the time we tend to get, let's say, a little upset when people challenge our beliefs, right? So we ourselves don't even want to start to think to challenge our beliefs. But I think if we have that skills of being able to challenge our beliefs a bit more, we're okay with other people challenging our beliefs too, because we know it's not personal, it's just for the best. And I think that takes a lot of emotional intelligence, because a lot of the time we're kind of thinking, oh, that person has something against me for them to question me like that. But in fact, it's not. It's just the thinking itself, right? So how would you say that emotional intelligence can help us to harness this potential of, understanding Myside bias versus, understanding, open-mindedness, so we can make fair decisions?
Yeah. Human beings, even though we have our thinking brain, our reasoning capability, but most of the time we are very driven by emotion, by intuition. So emotional intelligence really kind of tap into that emotional side. So it's a great resources, but we just have to be smart about it. When we face challenges from another person, it's worthwhile to kind of pause. Why I feel this way? Because our emotion is always true. So you have to why do I have this feeling, feel heard or feel invalidated? There's a wonderful research about our brain. There are two types of zones we can be in the brain. One is learning zone. One is performance zone. Learning zone means at that time your brain is just trying to get information because it knows the information it already has is not complete or may not be accurate. So it needs to optimize to improve its model there. The performance zone instead is, look how great I am, look how smart I am. So when you feel that hurt feeling from challenge from another person, just pause, am I in the learning zone or am I in the performance zone? If I feel hurt, maybe because I feel I'm in the performance zone, this person's challenge is kind of criticizing me, kind of disapproving me. What if I switch my zone, my brain to the learning zone? And this is kind of a self-awareness in your EQ to look a little bit deeper, pause the knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I'm hurt. Oh, this feels painful. Just stay with that feeling for a moment and say, am I not learning? So I'm going to perform this. I think that helps you kind of, actually this feedback, this challenge may help me if I put myself in the learning zone.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. And it's so important, right? When you think about the way you approach information, if we all approach it in the sense of learning and get that curiosity, it feels so much better than, I'm just annoyed by this thought or this comment, or I feel certain ways about a source of information. And in fact, whatever comes your way might be an opportunity to learn new things. It's kind of like scientists would gather data, right? So that's exactly what we're doing. You're just gathering more data. So I think another thing that is interesting about this whole concept is not just about our way of thinking. It's also about the people that we surround ourselves with. I think you mentioned this briefly earlier, and I'm pretty sure people might have heard of the concept of groupthink. And this is where, we are in a group of people, we get influenced by everyone's opinion, and we kind of like this tendency to want to agree with the group, to fit in, to belong. It affects the decision making. So we talked about open-mindedness for individual, which is, that's crucial, and it starts with individuals. But in the group context, it is going to be more challenging. So how can we encourage that open-mindedness in the group context, so that we can ensure that, the fair exchange of ideas are being made and we actually come to some fair decisions that are going to be beneficial for the greater good of the whole group?
I think, first of all, it's important for the group to realize the possibility of groupthink and to find a way to prevent it from happening. So if you already have it could happen, so that already a big step. And the step one there are concrete steps or methods you can implement to prevent or reduce groupthink. One could be let's have third-party facilitator rather than the boss. They're facilitating the conversation. Another method very often used is let's get anonymous feedback, so people will have kind of more safety to express their true opinion or feeling. So there are ways to, I think it's mentally, the whole team needs to be aware of the possibility, the risk of groupthink. And then second, we'll take actions, steps to prevent it, reduce it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think it starts with the awareness as well, right? Because more often than not, I think people are familiar with the concept of groupthink and they understand the risks that come with it, but they're just not thinking about the fact that, maybe we need a third-party facilitator today, or maybe we need to challenge what we are thinking. I'm sure all teams are aware of this, but it's just not in the forefront of their thinking when it comes to a discussion, perhaps because if there's a problem at hand or if there's a project to tackle, people might just get on with it and, get things done without taking a moment to pause and build in those mechanisms to help, prevent, having the bias. And another thing that's interesting in psychology, and you're a fan of psychology, so this concept is probably going to be fun to discuss when it's your turn. But cognitive dissonance is a real thing in our lives, right? It happens. And I mean, a few years ago, I had no idea what cognitive dissonance meant. But I've been a huge fan of psychology recently, and in the recent years, I've read up on it a bit more. For our audience, maybe not, but I do know that it can be a barrier to our open-mindedness, because of how it is. So first of all, since you're a fan of psychology, you could probably help our audience to understand what that means, cognitive dissonance. And second of all, how can we be aware of our own cognitive dissonance so that we can, make unbiased decisions and be wiser in our decision-making process?
So cognitive dissonance. I don't give it like a very academic answer.
No, we can just talk about it in a more casual way than academic, because we're not in that field academically. So you can explain it in your own words. And we can cut that part before as well.
Yeah. Cognitive dissonance, basically you have like a conflict in your head about something. You want to avoid that conflict of that opinion. So sometimes people do all kinds conscious or unconsciously tricks to avoid or resolve that. So I think again, if we, again, I'm going to use our brain. We have our reasoning brain and we have our primal, more emotional side. So self-awareness is really important. I love there's a African proverb. This is something from the Nigerian Igbo people. They say, wherever something stands, something else will stand beside it. So that means the world is, we are living in a world of duality. There's not just like binary, like either white, black or white. It's like sometimes conflict thing can happen at the same time. Emotionally, so that's the reasoning side, but more self-awareness. Your emotional resources really tap into your own feelings. Is observe it, stay with it. Avoid like immediate knee-jerk reaction, and then really think a little, feel a little bit deeper. Why I feel this way? I want to share probably it's a little bit of a story is easier. When I was at the Wisconsin Public Radio, we have a producer, Charles Morrow-Kin. He did a story about his hometown in Ohio. Believe it or not, the town, small town, is called Center of the World, literally.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a town that's really has gone through terrible economic times. Their steel mill is closed, and a lot of people had drug addiction problem. The opiate abuse. A lot of people are losing jobs, but they don't leave. They stayed there. So Charles Morrow-Kin went there to interview his friends from high school, his parents and relatives, a lot of people there, just to try to understand why people are stuck there. In his mind, he has great sympathy for these people, but at the same time, he felt very frustrated because he cannot convince them to make a better decision. Don't draw your 401k for another job or get some training. But once he's being brutally honest with his emotion and with this empathy, with this open-mindedness to talk to those people. And then he realized is for him, his decision to leave the town, to go to a bigger city, to have a very different line of work, he's kind of a person who loves adventure, who loves new experience. But for his people who stayed in Ohio, in that little town, for them, it's loyalty. I'm loyal to the place. I care about my fellow human beings here. I need to stay with them. So once he got to that level, it's still kind of conflict in his head, but he can understand. It's no longer this frustration disappeared. It's replaced with deep understanding, empathy, appreciation. It doesn't solve the problem, but at least there's no more fight between the two groups.
Yeah, definitely. I think the antidote to cognitive dissonance is probably open-mindedness, which is the opposite of Myside bias, right? Because we just try to reaffirm our belief, and if it's against our belief system, we kind of have this really strong reaction. And sometimes we make ourselves feel perhaps uneasy for, trying to resist the new sources of information, or a resistance from others against our ideas. And I think it's kind of like a constant battle, really, because we're all different as humans. And sometimes when something is not going our way, or something is not with our belief system, we're kind of questioning why are people thinking a certain way, and kind of resisting that idea is not really helpful. And I mean, growing up, I was certainly that person as well. I'm not saying that I'm great at, being open-minded. I was that person, and I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, I remember when my cousins moved away from our hometown to live in a different city. Our whole family, our whole extended family is in the capital city, and they moved to a whole different city. And I was kind of like, why would they do that? They're so far away, and they have to spend so much money on traveling back and forth, and they're so far away from family. Why would they choose that life? And I grew up and I understood perfectly why they did what they did, because it's just, a different belief system, different value system. And, it's for the best. And that is one small example amongst, I would say, many, many more examples that everyone can probably relate with. Maybe an idea from back when we were smaller and we kind of resisted. And then we realized, oh, now I understand that perfectly. When you grow up, because you get new perspectives, you hear new stories, and you kind of understand. And when you try to understand where other people are coming from, it really helps. But I don't think I don't think it discounts the fact that sometimes there are certain decisions that are just probably not beneficial for anyone being made. And at those times, while it's good to remain open-minded, it's also good to sort of keep the thought in mind that, yeah, if we think like scientists, if we look at everything of the big picture, we'll know whether it's actually a good decision or a not so great decision. There are certain things that can only make sense with time, but I think more often than not, we can see the science pretty clearly. For example, if we spend a lot of time just consuming content instead of creating content, and we kind of feel stuck, that's maybe a good sign, because, oh yeah, you know what, like you're kind of not feeling great about this, so maybe you should stop. Maybe you should redirect your attention, and that'll be good for you. So I'm saying all of this to kind of share how I would personally interpret, in building that open-mindedness into my lives, and kind of looking out for that Myside bias. But what are some of the other, actionable steps that our audience could probably potentially take, so that, A, they enhance their open-mindedness, and B, they sort of monitor their Myside bias so that they can make and process decisions better in both their personal lives and in group context, in professional lives?
One very useful strategy I use myself is always go beyond a label. Try to approach someone not as a member of a group, but really see that person as an individual. One example is I once have a coworker. She tends to be very kind of disorganized. We're very different working style. One time we happened to pass, some of us have some event near her house, and then see her house. It's kind of April, Easter time, but her door still has the Christmas wreath there. So, like my immediate, oh my gosh, look at this. And then later on, then I learned she hadn't put down the wreath. It's terrible. It's dried and it's kind of ugly looking now because a bird made a nest, and then there are eggs in that wreath. So you don't, once you know that person and then dig a little bit deeper, the reason behind a behavior or a decision, that may change your mind. That may change your perception of this person. So I always remember, because I just feel so embarrassed that time. I said that next time I need to do a better job, not to pass opinion or judgment so quickly. Just not to see person as someone as a label, as a group label, rather than like a very concrete individual.
Yeah. I think it's a process, right? It's like a continuous learning process in our lives where we just continue to challenge ourselves when it comes to these kinds of thinking, because it's easy to jump to conclusion. It's easy to label things like you were saying, because that's what we're used to. If we see a messy person, we're like, oh, that person's just messy. But when we really dig deep, maybe that person needs help because they're struggling mentally and they're not messy. They are actually very clean, but right now they're going through a rough time and they just don't want to clean. That's what I've learned through, watching a lot of TED Talks and lots of videos and research on psychology. I think that helps to enhance our open-mindedness too.
So that's strategy number one. And the second strategy is what I discussed. Like I have always ask myself, am I in the performance zone or in the learning zone? Because that really reduced the anxiety. Oh, I'm doing terrible, or I'm a failure. But then, I'm just learning this obstacle, or someone's challenging to me. Then you don't take it so personally. One story I heard from just listening to podcasts. There is a Nobel Prize winning biologist. So when he was doing an interview, the reporter asked himself, you studied life all your career. What makes a life? And then he said, when you look at a rock is not alive. It's pretty stable, pretty enduring. But they said, why? Because rock doesn't like life make mistakes. What makes life is something that can make mistakes, because when the life is duplicating itself, procreating itself, there are always some mistakes, but it's those mistakes that provide opportunity for evolution, for becoming better.
Yeah.
So I love that story. So I always remind myself, when you in a hardship, when you are down, when you say like, I'm not a rock. I make a mistake. It's fine.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful reminder. Yeah, I think it's good to remember that in the context of decision making as well, because sometimes we make decisions and then they turn out to be terrible decisions. And then we're like, oh, why am I so stupid? No, that's also like part of the self-talk as well. No, you're not stupid. You're just learning.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be so hard on yourself, and also don't be so hard on other people. So that's strategy number 2. Strategy number 3, I call it life rehearsal, because sometimes it's just so hard to make a decision by thinking about it.
Yeah,
I would like to have a life rehearsal. So give you a real example. I told you I was a computer programmer for 7 years. It's time for me to decide, okay, do I really switch over to media and get quit my pretty comfortable computer job, comfortable lifestyle, and become this poor graduate student again and do my Ph.D.? It's hard to make a decision because it's such a big decision. And I say, well, am I going to be so poor and I have to take so much student debt? So let me try this rehearsal idea I got from Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin, when he was a young printer, he has a small business, a printing shop. One time he is debating whether to print this very controversial pamphlet. He knew if he printed, he may get into trouble and his business may go bankrupt. But if he doesn't, he will feel kind of regret. So what did he do? He decided to live a poor man's job for a week. He will just drink water, eat bread, and sleep on the floor for a week. He said, if I feel fine after a week, I'm going to print it. If I cannot stand it, then I'm not going to print it. Well, he felt fine, so he printed. And luckily, he didn't get into trouble. So I used the same idea. I lived for 6 months, poor graduate student lifestyle. No dining out, no travel, no new clothes, nothing. So really just live on a poor graduate student budget for 6 months. So I was thinking, if I feel fine, then I'm going to quit my job and go to graduate school. If I don't feel fine, hey, I saved a nice sum of money. I can take a trip or something. After 6 months, I feel fine. I made the decision. I was so confident I was making the right decision because I tried it.
Yeah.
So that's a strategy I recommend to people.
So good. Wow. Yeah, I've never heard of that before. You're probably giving people a lot of ideas. Yeah, live rehearsal. I love that. Yeah, that's such a nice thing. Yeah, we don't know until we've tried, right? So I really like that you actually went ahead and try it.
Yeah, because again, you are not only using your reasoning brain, you're using your emotion, you're using your feeling to give yourself more feedback if this is a right decision for you down the road.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. I really love all those strategies, especially the last one, the live rehearsal. I think, I got to try that too. Because I've been contemplating whether I should do a PhD, like to research something in depth. What is it? I don't know yet. But then I was also thinking the same question. I was like, do I want to go back to being a student? I don't know. It's already been challenging. Like this adulting life. I love learning, which is why I started to think about it. But maybe I could try and research what people with PhD lives look like, and I can try to live like them for a little bit and see if I can stand it. So yeah, that's fun. I like that. Thank you so much for that. Now, let's go into something a bit more practical even. I know you've given us some strategies and tips, but we have this practice part where we dig deeper into one particular practice that our audience could potentially try. So today we're talking about overcoming Myside bias. And obviously you were already mentioning some steps to cultivate our open-mindedness and try different things. But what would be one strategy that you would recommend to anyone so that they can overcome their Myside bias?
I would say to watch out our information diet. When we eat food, we know, you cannot eat just one food group. You need to have a variety. Yeah. I think the information diet is similar. If you want to have all the nutrients to be healthy, watch out for, try to get information from primary sources. If you want to understand politics, or let's say why Republicans think that way, really talk to a Republican, an individual, kind of have an in-depth conversation with that person, not just read what's written about Republicans on the news. Have variety of information sources, preferably primary source or first-hand information. And the second is just to information bias. Okay, I have to think of a second. I probably will go back to the learning zone versus performance zone. Just be aware when you are encountering information that doesn't agree with your existing opinion, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just have to switch your brain mode to the learning zone and ask yourself, why do I need to feel validated so often? That's actually a sign of self-doubt, and you need to have external someone to give you validation. Therefore, you feel good about it yourself. So I think it's good to switch to be aware, and then to switch from a performance zone to learning zone when you are encountering challenging information. Mm-hmm. There's a great TED Talk, by the way, about this learning zone and the performance zone. The speaker's name is let's see, I have it here. Eduardo Briceño. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want, I can later on. I can send you the link.
Yeah, certainly. We can link that in the show notes for our audience for sure.
So that's that one. And then, if I may, to help kind of all of us have this self-awareness, I highly recommend a wonderful book by Jonathan Haidt. He's a, guess what, social psychologist. It's called The Righteous Mind. It's talking exactly about this kind of Myside bias. He digs very deep into the fundamental factors that cause this bias. Once you know why, it's much easier to deal with, to come up with a solution.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of those practices, not just one. I think you gave us about 3, and that's really good to know. Now, let's go to the last part of this conversation. We've covered quite a bit of information already about, overcoming Myside bias, cultivating our open-mindedness, and some really interesting practical tips from you. I think at the end of the day, it is something that we need to start from self-awareness, right? We need to really think about how we are thinking in the first place, which is again, like I've talked about this book so many times on the 2 different shows I host here at LMSL, but I just think it's so suitable if our audience would also probably try reading Think Again by Adam Grant. It's such a great read when it comes to challenge our thinking and thinking like a scientist. And another one that I've been reading recently that's also probably really good to give perspectives would be The Art of Thinking Clearly by Robert. I forgot his last name now, but yeah, it's such a great read because it's like a collection of short essays, I would say, but it's really amazing in helping us to think about how we're thinking and sort of ways to look out for biases in our thinking. And maybe sometimes the thing that we think to be right might not be so. And that's kind of like the fun of learning. That's the fun about life, that you get to learn new things all the time. It keeps you on your toes and keeps you sort of really just engaged in life. So last, before we let you go, I would love to get you to do a little open mic. I know you have your own TED Talk already. So this is, normally I tell my guests, imagine you have your own TED Talk stage. Why don't you go talk about it? You already have your own TED Talk stage. So yeah, I'm curious to know more about, what else you're passionate about, what else you would like to share with our audience. Maybe it could be on the same topic, or maybe it could be about something else that you're passionate about. So the floors are yours. Go for it.
Well, thank you. I'm always passionate about reading, about books, and my TED Talk is also about the power of reading. I'm happy to report that I have my my book, like on the basis of the talk, coming out, but it's in Chinese. I'm sorry. So the Chinese title is 读书推迟妥协那天的到来. So it means reading for defiance, how to overcome challenges in life. I'm also kind of passionate about kind of the creative side of things. I'm always like to try a little bit maybe writing fiction, or maybe try to learn a music instrument. So for me, life is like a buffet. I wanted to try every dish a little bit. I may not be good at like majority of them, but just the fact of trying new things, have a new experience, it's very invigorating. And also, as I grow older, I think it's very easy actually to become cynical. For me, one way to deal with that is to kind of get new information, get new experience. I think that the pandemic is pretty hard for a lot of people, and it's also it's kind of time for a lot of people to review their life choices, review their plan, what's next. So I kind of take that also as a opportunity to see what else I can try. So right now, I'm trying to write a little kind of opera. So I'm not good at it, but it's just fun to try new things. Am I rambling? I'm sorry.
No, you're not. I think you're just sharing a few different things about yourself, and that's really wonderful, especially the book. That's exciting. Will it be translated into English?
I'm not sure right now, but I think that talk is in English, really kind of the summary of the book already.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to go and watch the talk after this conversation for sure. I feel like I might have watched it before. I need to double check. But yeah, that sounds really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And thanks for being here. It's so great to learn from your journey, especially because, I'm still fascinated by the fact that you changed career and you took a detour just so you can get to the career you want. That's super inspiring.
Well, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to share. I mean, we're still in the same boat. We are still struggling with a lot of similar biases or challenges. Yeah. So it's wonderful to be able to compare notes and share ideas.
Yeah, and I'm sure we all do, especially our audience. Everyone does struggle with this to a certain extent. And it's good to get a reminder every now and again.
Exactly.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.